Here's the problem with space. It's all the space. Really gets in the way. You see, there's so much space that there ended up being a lifetime of nothing in between all the interesting parts. As it happens, there just isn't a way to get around this. That explains why in the quiet glow of the 6th millennium, half of humanity has drifted over the horizon of civilization. They're out there, rutting and rotting, leaving their mark and cleaning up the marks left before them. Rimworlds, they call those places. Places far beyond a signal, off the beaten track, or on tracks that just couldn't be beat. Places where you're truly free to do anything. Sounds exciting, but the thing is, anything can be done to you in return. And when you crunch the numbers, most of the things that can theoretically happen to you in life are quite nasty. I suppose that's why on the core worlds they don't really let anything happen. But people get the bug now and again, or the shove, and head off into the unknown. They travel to these Rimworlds to begin a new life on the planets our forebears painstakingly terraformed for a bit, then gave up on. You have to go into a sort of coma to travel to these places, since it takes hundreds of years. You can wake up roughly as old as you were before, now facing the future in an unknown land. A lot of those lands are real dives, since it's so hard to keep them clued in on the ways of civilization that they often get forgotten. Or they straight up forget how to forge plaster steel and then kill each other trying to hoard the last scraps. You know how it is with people sometimes. Means these worlds are often just a slow disaster, boosted up now and again when a colony ship arrives with fresh supplies and fresh meat. Such a colony ship once arrived on a planet called Pieces, but were received quite rudely. So rudely that the ship was quickly stolen by some wild, fervorous locals and perhaps accidentally launched off on a new course. The insurance companies had rigged the whole thing to blow just in case this happened, but again pesky space got in the way of a quick termination. Took so long for the detonation signal to travel from HQ that it was some 30 years before the joyriding ship finally got snapped in two by fiery blasts. But it was not entirely inhumane. Those aboard were invited to wake from stasis and stumble into escape capsules shortly before. Crew and cargo were jettisoned on a collision course with the nearest inhabited planet. By the grace of a cosmic alignment, they had been passing through a system with such a planet in orbit. But such good luck rarely lasts. It was a Rimworld. This renegade crew were tumbling into a whole world of trouble. These escape capsules weren't all on the same trajectory, so we'll concern ourselves with a particularly remarkable one and see how it does. The capsule itself was torched by the atmosphere, but that was all accounted for in its design. It was burned to smithereens, but inside its 3 occupants remained safe in so-called drop pods. You can guess how these worked. Handily, they came with a flimsy, glittering parachute of sorts, so they touched down at the drop site without immense injury to those inside. The poor cargo hadn't been given the same treatment. It was sticking out of the mud on the warm mountainside those pods had chanced upon. After a few minutes of steaming quiet, the drop pod doors were rocketed off, and the escape sequence was complete. Now, for a new kind of escape. "Lady!" a voice shouted as a burly fellow with a bowl cut swiped at the smoke blocking his exit. Outside his pod, a young woman was standing amid the mess, pointing at the sky. She was half his height, and from behind was partially hidden by her long sheets of mud-encrusted black hair. "This ain't Pieces," she said, holding back any tone. Wrong sun in the sky had given the game away. I should explain that these travellers had no memory of their journey in stasis, so it wasn't so naive to wonder if they were still on the right planet. "Holy gags, that was quick. Is this the Hillocat? Where's Griffin?" the man asked, looking around. It was a pleasant view, warm and verdant like the lands south of his old home village. It was hard to believe they weren't on Pieces, but the little stargazer was never wrong. "Why would this be a Hillocat?" she asked, finally looking down from the sky. Didn't you hear Griffin? That's what's out here. Out somewhere. This place feel holy to you? You think finding a hill of cats as easy as feeling it? You ain't no witch, are you? Then why are you here? What? It's just us. Everyone's gone. How'd I end up still with you, bless 'em all? We got in the same carriage, didn't we? When all the bleating was going off, I had your hand and we went after those lights. Thought the others were coming too, heard 'em behind me. The other carriages? You what? 3 yams down the right side, there was a marking identical to the one above the doors we went in. Another carriage. Thought even you wouldn't remember that mad dash. And I thought even you wouldn't forget that someone else got in with us. The woman gestured to the 3rd drop pod remnants lying on their side behind the man. By the bits, hope it's Griffin, he said, turning to investigate. Hope it ain't, the woman muttered, staying still. Oi! Anyone in there? The man called. He moved closer and fanned the smoke away. Hello? You alive in there? A cough came from inside the pod, then a dog's bark. The man bent over to take a look. A pudgy fellow with comical spines of black hair was lying on his side, still hanging on to the overhead grips. Sitting beside him with a dour expression was a husky, which wagged its tail and started panting at the man outside as he leant in. Oh, you, coming out, lad? The man asked. The man in the pod shook his head. It's not him, the older man called to the woman. At this she came over and peered in too. Hey idiot, get out of there, she said with a scowl. The man inside immediately complied, saying nothing. The dog raced out and ran around him a few times, then disappeared off into the nearby long grass. The pudgy man looked at the sky and pointed at the sun. Wrong bit, he whispered. Yeah, we know. Who are you? There was no hound in the carriage, was there? The woman asked. The man dropped his arm, then sat on the ground without responding. Hey, mate, come on, the older man said, crouching beside him. We're in trouble here, alright? But we'll be fine. I'm Boy, this is Lady. What's your call? The young man started patting his legs as if looking for a pocket. However, all 3 of them had lost their possessions up on the colony ship after some pushy mechanical arms redressed them in silky blue pajamas. Unable to find whatever it was, the man lay back in the mud with his eyes closed and whispered, Staves. You what? Boy asked. Staves! Staves almost screamed. Boy and Lady turned aside and let him lie in the mud in peace. Bloody hell, we've got some noble wonk, Boy muttered. Forget him, what about us? We need to get out of here, Lady insisted. No chance, look at all this. Boy started walking amidst the wrecked cargo. There were all manner of tools, familiar and unfamiliar, on top of sweet-smelling boxes that might just be food. We got the colony kits here. So what? We have to find the others. We have to find firewood, Lady. Smoke'll lead 'em to us if they're around here. We got the gear and they don't. We can pretend it's the village, can't we? Since we'd have to start over there anyway. Don't. Sorry, won't mention it. We just gotta get a roof over our heads. This was what Griffin was saying all this does, wasn't it? He had the man from the cosmos who was talking his whatever talk, and the bishop was saying it's all for making houses and the like. How does it work? You tell me, clever bits. I've never seen this stuff before. You recognise a shovel, don't you? Boy, just... And what about him? Lady asked, pointing back at Staves. He still hadn't moved. We can make use of him. Let's see how we feel come dinner time, huh? Boy grinned. Lady pouted, stifling a laugh, and got to work dragging gear from the wreckage. It was colonizing gear, as mentioned, intended for use on pieces, one imagines. Piles of nicely polished stretches of wood, rough, wrinkly sheets of metal, and tools ranging from easy-peasy spades and hammers to weird headless brooms and burning hot quills. But you didn't necessarily need to know how that technology from the far cosmos worked to get some use out of it. The quills could cut the wood and metal into shapes in an instant, and the headless broom made a loud banging noise when you pulled a lever on its underside, which also seemed to launch a tiny arrow so fast your eyes couldn't keep up with it. A crossless crossbow, the pair concluded. While it took some effort to dig all the fallen crates up and fizzle away at the metal clasps holding them shut, the reward was worth it. The colony kit featured bedding, cooking equipment, and lots of gizmos of unknown design. Each item came with a pictorial guide that seems to indicate how to assemble and use it. One gizmo appeared to make fire inside a little glass ball. Handy, but baser needs had to be seen to first. The pair caught sight of the husky dog now and again as it dashed about, and decided to catch up to it. It saw them chasing and jogged on just ahead, taking them about 10 minutes from the crash site to a river running from a cave in the side of a small mountain. You are probably imagining this quite differently to how it was, since this was a terraformed mountain, a cheaply terraformed one at that. These imitations of geological marvels tended to lack foothills and were more like walls of rock that shot up suddenly, creating unweathered mesas with unnatural shapes. The dog stopped to drink from the river. Boy and lady soon followed suit. "Says cannibal," Boy said after glancing the dog's collar. "Gotta be griffins, right?" "Might be a cosmic people dog," lady said. "Not written like that it ain't. Castle mutt for sure, or a hunting dog. Might be able to find us some help, mightn't it? And what's it found us here then?" "Well..." Boy looked up at the banks and cliffs around the cave. The rock was bluish and clean, lacking moss or the wrinkles of a geological past. "It's like a castle," he commented. Very square and about the right height, his assessment was on the mark. "Don't need a castle," lady said. She was looking into the river cave, seeing light at the other end. "Hello?" she called into it. Only echoes. "I'd agree, but no one thinks a castle's any good until it all goes down the pit. You saw them clamouring in the town. Invaders must have been at all the villages." "Boy, no," lady croaked, shaking her head. Sorry. Well, don't matter. Hunk of rocks are used to us right now, innit? That's one wall done already," Boy said, clapping a hand on the grainy rock. It was cool to the touch. The mesa cast a shadow over the pile of materials that lady and boy started hauling up to the rock and river's edge. Didn't take much sun tracking to work out they were in the southern hemisphere, although Boy didn't really understand the meaning of lady's rote explanation of such. The dog, Cannibal, followed them backwards and forwards, and barked with obvious hesitation at the odd small mammal in the grass. Lots of new planet smell to process, no doubt. After a few hours of dragging, Boy and lady had a decent pile of wooden boards with little teeth around the edge. These teeth let them be slotted together pretty fast. After a couple hours more, the pair had hammered together 3 huts against the rock face. A bedding box provided for 2, while the kitchen gear was hauled into the 3rd, stacked unhygienically in the dusty dirt. You might be wondering what happened to that Staves fellow. Lady and Boy were too, having not seen him even around the crash site all day. They speculated that he had gone his own way, but in truth he was there, just hard to spot. He had been lying in the long grass of the lush hillside, looking at the new sky. It was a shock when he plodded up to the huts at dusk like some well-groomed yeti. "Oi, you feeling alright, fella?" Boy said, putting down the crowbar he was heaving against a stubborn supply box. Staves nodded and stood still, staring at the box. "We reckon there's another load of the cosmic bed stuff in here. We found a set earlier, you wouldn't believe it. Gets dirty quicker than nothing else though." Staves looked over at the huts, then to Lady over by the river, who was reading through those pictograph guides several at a time on the ground around her. After he said nothing for a while, Boy held out the crowbar. "You want to help?" he asked, the friendly veneer fading. Staves shook his head. "Let me put it another way. You want to eat?" Boy stressed. Staves raised a hand, revealing an empty paper container. It was one of those sweet-smelling packages from the crash, theorized to be food. Staves skillfully ripped it along its seams, then folded it away into his pocket. Without a word, he slipped into one of the huts. "By the bits! Even a bloody hillocat won't save you, Wonky!" Boy shouted. He listened for a response, but heard only Lady's muttering mixed with the hiss of water in the cave. He thought about storming into the hut, but turned instead to look at Lady. She had been pulling the pictograms closer and closer as the light faded, and showed no signs of stopping yet. Boy sighed aloud. "Shut up," Lady immediately said. "Ain't you even a bit worried?" Boy asked her, trudging over with sinking steps. "Been worse. What about Auntie? Oh, you remember her now. What? Thought you only cared about Griffin. I don't care. I just want to know what's going on." Lady waved an arm around her. "This is going on. This could be it." "It ain't it." "Why not?" "'Cause, well, it ain't the Hillocat, and why'd we end up wherever we are if there weren't one somewhere?" "Disaster?" "Ain't no disaster." "What about the wonk?" "He's wonking out in there. Let's have him cool down for now." "You're the one who's itching for it, bro." "It's dangerous, you know, gotta be ready for anything." "But not a disaster, right?" "No, it's not." "Just keep an eye open." "Might do." With this, Lady started slapping closed her books and piling them up. "Anything good?" Boy asked. "Reckon so." "Wanted your own farm, didn't you?" "Wanted Dad's farm." "Then why wouldn't you kill him?" Lady asked with rehearsed pointedness. "Didn't come to that in the end, did it?" "Yeah, it was worse." "Thought we weren't going to talk about it?" "Alright, night." "Night?" "Night." "As you say then." Boy left Lady by the river and went into the other bed hut to sample the colony kit's fine threads. Cannibal came over and sat next to Lady, looking expectantly at the food boxes piled on a pallet nearby. "Might not be enough," Lady commented to the dog. Cannibal didn't have such a nuanced view. Lady ended up sitting with the husky all night, sharing a spot of sleep here and there. It was hard to drift away from that fresh spring air, marketed as the embodiment of freedom in places light decades distant. For Lady, it was very familiar. Sleeping out with the animals was how her whole ordeal with Boy and family had started. 2 days ago, she had thought it over as she witnessed the underwhelming death of their cruel father. If it weren't for Boy's hand in hers, she might have stayed there amid the mania of the invasion, come what may. Instead, she was slave, pirate, captive, and colonist all in one day, and had gotten lost like a character stepping from the pages of a book into another. But here or there, the paths forward were identical: die or live again. The alien stars gave no directions. She could pray if this world truly had a Hillocat, a node of the Almighty God. She could also pray if it did not. By her will or against it, the sun emerged, its light too soft, its disk too small, and gave her another day. Cannibal was stirred by the light, and returned to anxiously staring at the food pallet. Birds and forest creatures were making a racket all across the mountainside, and in the distance, trails of smoke were mixing into the lowland mists of a great plain to the east. "Fine then," Lady muttered, dusting herself off. For all that had ended far away, that which began then on that mountainside would surpass it. Hence we encounter the story of the 3 survivors from a lost planet, facing down the hand they were dealt, marvelous and strange, fearful and fresh, conclusive yet rejuvenating. They would make their mark on that forgotten world, as the world in turn marked them. Intrigued? I'd best get into the filthy details then, eh? I assure you, it's going to be quite the tale. "Potatoes, corn, dry rice, it's all the bloody same seeds," Boy remarked. He was digging through the farming kit on the morning of his second day as an impromptu colonist. "They stole it from us," Lady concluded, catching the seed bags Boy was throwing over his shoulder. "Something don't add up. Why'd they take it to the ship then?" "Cosmic people stuff," Lady shrugged. "It's mad though. You think that wonk knows anything?" "Probably not." "Gonna ask him." "Oi, wonk!" "What was this?" "Staves! My good lad! Get your fat ass out here!" Staves peered around the door of his hut. Yes, it was his hut now, it seemed. He didn't help build it, but that was the way in the old castles of pieces. As usual, he just stared without speaking. Boy was waving him over, and like a fish being reeled in, Staves approached the colony kit with diminishing steps. "You have any idea why the cosmic folk were hauling seeds from our fields? How is that possible? You heard anything from the bishops during those visits or whatnot?" Boy asked. Staves pointed at Boy. "Is your name really Boy?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, Boy, and this is Lady." "That's weird." "Uh-huh. And what kind of name is Staves then?" "That's my name." "Yeah, I know. I was trying to... Look, answer my question." "Who called you those names?" he asked, unmoved by Boy's increasing frustration. "It's none of your business, Wonk," Boy snapped. Staves nodded and began returning to his hut. "Boy, I think he's a little wrong in the head," Lady commented. "Better make it worse. Pray, Staves. Pretty stupid name that and all, huh? Gonna explain yourself on that pile of rubbish? I thought not," Boy hollered, his voice ringing around the arms of the mountainside. Lady rushed over and tapped Staves on the shoulder before he made it back to his flat-pack abode. "Staves, aren't you going to help us? We might die," she said, with eyes as wide as they would go. Staves' eyes widened too, in fear. Let's just wait for the others," he mumbled. He tried to turn away, but Lady grabbed him. "We might never see the others. We're trapped here, Staves. You're from the castle, aren't you? Never lived on the land?" Staves shook his head. "Well, the thing is, we're going to run out of that cosmic food, especially if you're planning on keeping this up." Lady poked Staves' pudgy belly, drawing out a little shriek. "I don't know how to... Sorry, I don't know," he blurted out. "Can you help us? What did you even do for Griffin?" "Sing." "Sing? And dance a bit." "By the bits, he likes that." "I don't know." "Is there anything you do know?" "I can write." "Write?" "Right." "Is that going to keep us alive here?" "Might." "And what if someone comes to steal our kit?" "Fight." Fight? Suddenly Lady faltered. She saw the crossless crossbow leaning against the wall in Staves' hut. She stared at it until Staves broke the silence with a loud vocalization, repeating a note in short triplets. In response, Cannibal bounded up from her sniffing patrol nearby and sat beside him. Staves crouched and hugged the husky, offering her some cosmic people food mush. "So, you can talk to the hound?" Lady asked. Staves nodded. "That's good. Good. See if you can get it to find us some food, or help, or anything, alright?" Staves nodded. "And if there's any trouble, you know how that thunderbolt bow thing works, don't you?" Staves nodded. "Good. Okay, that's alright, isn't it?" Staves nodded. It occurred to Lady that Staves might have just been rubbing his face on Cannibal the whole time, but she considered some form of agreement reached nonetheless. "Seeds are from the cosmos," he said as Lady walked off. "What's that?" she asked. "Same seeds as cosmic people. We might have got them the same place as them, in the past. Ancient ballads of cosmic people were around, before the first Hillocat got found. Not allowed to read them, but trust me." With those final words, Staves made eye contact with Lady for the first time, and the intensity of his earnest stare almost bowled her over. "Right," she uttered before scrambling back to Boy. Boy was kicking the mud beside the river and sniffing the scattering dust. "You get anything?" he asked. "He's..." Lady trailed off. "What?" "I don't know." "Great Gadby, you fell in love with him just like that?" "What?" "Get that look off your face. I saw his dog whispering. That's farm talent, that is. I'll work on him. You can cool off in the river if you like." "Boy, what's wrong with you?" "Been waiting to see who'd get ya. Didn't think it'd be out here." "Boy, cursed bits be yours." "Yep, all of ours. I'm gonna do this though. If we're here a while, you'll all be worshipping me for it. Let's have ourselves a homestead." Ignoring the rage Lady had been driven into, Boy got to work. His profession, no less, crop farming. It was easy to ignore the entire situation when you were wrist deep in the filth, and the seedling taters were more willing servants than his two fellow colonists. With this, it was like things were back to normal for Boy. This time last week he'd been doing the exact same thing on a different world, planting below, keeping an eye out above. Now it wasn't his father he had to keep track of, but whatever the new world was brewing out there in the swaying mountainside forests. While Boy was kept busy, Lady carried on setting up the lean-tos and huts to stow the colony kit away. She had left a load of unknown cosmic people stuff in a box in one such shed, and later heard a clanking sound from inside. Peering around the door, she found Staves sitting on a table covered in the pictograph colony guides. He was darting his head back and forth between them and attempting to combine a few spindly machinations in various orientations. Was this helping? It was truly impossible to say, but Lady was satisfied that her intervention that morning had worked, and she was almost certain that she wasn't in love with the wonk, despite how long she spied on him for. That evening, she and Boy established sleeping spots for all in a terrace of 3 huts against the mountainside. Already they had something resembling the kind of borderland rural village Boy had spoken of from his younger days on the march, albeit lacking the hectic motion of village life. As it happened, a little more life was on the way. Boy and Lady spent the 3rd day shoring up their shelters, while Staves clanked about in the shed with a set of seemingly impervious metal eggs from the colony kit, throwing them around to the uproarious wonder of Cannibal. Then, that evening, 2 people came hiking up the mountainside. And for clarity, remember the mountainside was almost flat, so the up part of the hike shouldn't be overstated. "Oi, stop there!" Boy shouted once he spotted them. Staves took one look from the shed and quickly dashed out. Lady, peering from the growing kitchen next door, thought her brave knight was about to deliver on his promise with the thunderbolt bow. But he actually scurried into another hut, Lady's hut no less, and slammed the door closed, apparently extinguishing the candle glowing through the gaps in the doorframe too. "By the bits and all, you're bloody alive!" she heard Boy shout outside. Her fears retreating, she stepped out too, and was shocked to see the same face that had greeted her when she had fled to Lord Griffin's castle on the fateful day. "Auntie!" she gasped. "Hello, Poppet! Fancy this then!" the woman smiled. She wore a long black coat like an executioner from the capital, and a like-coloured tool hung from a strap across her chest, roughly resembling another crossless crossbow. "She's alive! I knew we weren't doomed!" Boy beamed to Lady. His aunt chuckled and put a hand on his shoulder. "Oh Boy, you are a delight! No, we are doomed," she assured him. "This whole pilgrimage has gone to the pits and back already. Yet sure as bells ring on Peace Day, this isn't the end of it." "Who else made it?" Lady asked. "No sign of Griffin, tell you that much. Oh, and that's bad news for him, because you know what they say. Well, they say this in the castle. You would have heard it later, but... Well, they say that old fart can't live without me. So I'm here, he's probably stuck in his own trouser pocket halfway down from space." "Oh, I do wonder sometimes, but that's not important, is it? You're doing alright. You look fetching. You always had that lovely hair, Lady. Raccoona blood. They all look like that in the tribes, I heard. So anyway, I dropped in the little carriage just over those hills down... Well, you can't see them now. There's a strange place there. I thought it was cosmic people, but no, just... Well, I don't know how to describe it. They're all dressed like a tool bench." She gestured to her black duster. "In fact, got one of them here keeping tabs on me, don't I, darling?" Now she was speaking over her shoulder to the second figure, a man in a brilliant yellow overshirt with a revolver belt just barely keeping said shirt tucked over his rotundity. He looked about at the crew with pursed lips, saying nothing when Boy tried to introduce himself. "Oh, leave him, he don't speak Tindril," the aunt said. "But, and here's the weird thing about them lot, they sometimes get you if you talk in one bastion like a priest." "You know one bastion?" Boy asked. "Bits and pieces from around the castle. Had to fix things between Griffin and the bishops all the time, didn't I? Anyway, it's true, they know quite a few of the words themselves. Imagine that." "Makes sense to me," Boy nodded confidently. "Does it? Oh, you are a clever one. What's it all about then?" "Means Griffin's got us to the right place, doesn't it? There really is a Hillocat here." At the mention of a Hillocat, a one bastion word referring to sacred places or things, the second visitor perked up and stepped forward to listen more closely. "Don't get into that. He'll think you have something they can nick, won't they?" the aunt scolded him. "But Boy, you're right," Lady said quietly. There's no other way. There really is a chance to draw close to the Overlord. By the bits. Told ya, we can find it together. You staying, Auntie? Boy asked. Well, actually I'm his prisoner right now, she said, nodding at the yellow shirt man. Only here because he's checking all the crash sites. On his rounds he is. I think the trouble is because my cosmic carriage landed on his cow. Big hairy thing it was. He's taking me to their big town. I reckon a week away or something. Time to brush up on the one bastion and charm things back together. Another day, another job, innit? What are we meant to do? Better brush up as well, huh? Best not alone, though. Might be more of us around the place if you're lucky. Actually, we have a wonk from the castle. You probably know him, Staves. Oh, Staves! I love Staves! Auntie beamed at her captor, perhaps eager to introduce him to her pet minstrel, but the enthusiasm wasn't mutual. Right, well he's in there, Boy scoffed, pointing at the relevant hut. He's like a mouse. Staves! Yoo-hoo! The aunt called. Stop being rude and come say hello! When there was no response, Auntie gripped her weapon and lit up the mountainside with a burst of fire. It was directed at Staves' hut, not that the shots landed anywhere close. It is loud, isn't it? She nodded, sniffing the smoke drifting from the barrel. The door on the hut opened and Staves peered out. Bits be with you, missy, he said, barely audible. You speak Wombastian, don't you, my little pig? Auntie called with a smile. Yes, missy. And you'll talk to the strange folk around here for my niece and nephew, won't you? Yes, missy. You'll have to show them your songs, won't you? Yes, missy. I still have your hat, it was in my bag the whole time. Shall I leave it here for you? Yes, missy. He's a good boy, that Staves, Auntie said. Boy remained credulous of that, and asked Missy to stay a few more times, but she was insistent on going with the silent local. Really, you'll be fine, she claimed. You've got those quills, don't you? I've seen him use them. You can cut down trees, and then you run it over the wood and fiddle the twisty bits, and it can make it change into stuff. You can feel the bloody bits in the air as he does it. Magic it is. You'll get the hang of it. Staves is going to learn it for us, Lady said. He's a marvel, a miracle. Wait till you hear his voice. Griffin always had trouble with that angel. He's too much, really. But I'll leave you to it then, shall I? Keep your hands clean. Oh, hang on. I should say, boy, lady, that I'm terribly sorry about your father. Why? Lady spat. You know, it's polite to be, isn't it? You're better off here, I know it as well as you. Worked out, didn't it? You've got your whole lives ahead of you, so don't let it pass you by. Hill of Cat'll wait until you're ready, won't it? I'll write you. Stay clean. Without much more of a farewell, she was gone, flowing with inexplicable confidence for her kin's future in the wilds. Boy could hardly try to understand this strange meeting, as his mind was filled with ancient prophecies, lost prayers, and the righteous goal of a Hillocat crusade. The holy words and the crops, it's all linked, he argued to Lady the next morning. There's a Hillocat here for sure, and we've been brought here to find it. That's what all this is about. Maybe, but what are we actually gonna do? We can't go walking in these stupid clothes, Lady said. We'll sort that out. We'll sort everything out. This is it, Lady. It's gonna be us. Me and you. Imagine it, holy crusaders. We'll get the wonk to make a song about us. That does sound nice. I'm just worried. Courage for the cosmic peace, Boy chanted, waving his arms at the sky. You really think the wonk will help us? If he don't, then we don't need him. That's the path, isn't it? Guess we'll learn it hands and faces. It was agreed that they would carry on unpacking the colony kit to further their nest, with eyes open for a holy relic of the supernatural Overlord. The Overlord was manifested from a large number of these so-called Hillocats, and prophecy foretold that the reason behind the chaos of pieces was that all the pieces after which it was named were not actually present. That is to say that a crusade to another world was required to bring salvation, or some such thing. One Lord Griffin had fancied himself such a crusader, and the arrival of the cosmic people to pieces, coinciding with the arrival of refugees Boy and Lady to his castle, had bundled the fate of them all together before unravelling down to that collection of mucky panelboard shacks in a forgotten woods. The courtier Staves fell from the weave also, but was he as passionate a crusader as the rest? Very hard to tell with the young man, yet one could divine a few clues from his strange ways. One clue came that same day, when Lady went into her hut to find Staves sitting on a stool, staring at a boulder, clearly dragged in there via the churned up mud trailing back out the door. It was a rough, common rock, not so worthy of inspection. Obviously, Staves knew otherwise. "Lady, tell me who you are," he asked, keeping perfectly still. "I'm worried about you. Do you really need to be in here?" was the answer as Lady sat on her bed. "I need to tell you who I am." Staves picked up a chisel and started clunking away at the rock. "Can't you just say it? Or sing it, minstrel?" "Sorry." "Missy said you're a raccoona." "That's what they tell me." "You can't talk to barbarians like me, is that it?" "Just need to know what you look like." "Staves, you are allowed to look at me, you know." Staves disagreed and kept chiseling away. "You don't know for sure?" he asked after a while. "What for sure? Raccoona?" "No, I was a baby. You'd think a castle wonk would know what was happening in the villages." "No." "Really?" "Sorry." "They stole me. Didn't you ever wonder where the slaves were coming from?" "I didn't talk to any slaves." "Yeah, but you saw them, didn't you?" "Sometimes." "And they looked like me, didn't they? Like northerners?" "Didn't really look, sorry." "By the bits. Black hair and sideways lashes, that's what they all comment on. Maybe you can just imagine it." "I have black hair." "Yeah. You a raccoona?" "No." "Sure?" "It used to be brown. They made it black in the castle." "What? They changed your hair?" "Griffin likes it." "Right. That's why it's all ugly too, stupid spikes and slants like a monster?" Staves had no comment on this. Lady actually felt a pang of guilt and looked around for a way to salve her insult. She saw the hat Missy had thrown in at Staves the previous night, still sitting upended in the dirt. "What we'll do is give you a nice, wonky look, but one that seems a little more normal. How about this?" she said, placing the black bowler over that offensively featured head of hair. Staves touched the hat with one finger, then went back to chiseling right away. Lady was now standing right at his back, and could see something emerging from the rock. With each tap of the hammer on the chisel's end, the tip would spark against the igneous crust and blast some away. A cosmic people tool. It was revealing the image of a face, with a wide chin and tall forehead. It was her. Understanding now, she sat back on the bed and watched Staves work. The steady rhythm of the chiseling sent her dozing off, and its sudden end brought her back a couple of hours later. She rose, coughing against warm, dusty air, and saw a sharp-edged stone face sharing a close stare with Staves. As far as Lady knew her precise appearance, this was it. "No way! You did it! You were peeking," she said with a smile. Staves shook his head. "Just remembered you from when I looked before," he said. I'd do that too. When you see something, you can always look back and see it perfectly. You get that?" "Had to practice." "People always called me weird for it. They said it was magic from the tribes, so I shut up. And it is magic, I reckon?" After a long pause, she added, "Looks like we're both witches, then." Staves looked at her for supposedly the second time. His square face was coated in dust, and the quick motion of his neck launched a cloud from the rim of the bowler. "You think well of me?" he asked. Lady glanced at the door before replying, "Maybe. Is it true that you're in love with me?" "What?" Lady chirped, jumping to her feet. "That's what I heard." "What you heard? Staves, we've got work to do, don't be stupid. I never even said you could come in here, did I?" "Sorry," he said, wandering off outside and leaving Lady with her stone mirror. Lady didn't pay it much attention, busy being furious, although she wasn't quite sure what at. She ended up strolling from the bedroom huts over to the kitchen, a sturdier construct against the other side of the U-shaped notch in the mountain they were calling home. Inside, she anger-chewed a load of cosmic people food and stared at the wall. She could hear Staves trying to chisel open those strange metal eggs, but each time he just launched it off his desk and into a wall or two. Lady stewed for a bit, then stood to go set the record straight. But at that moment, there was a loud bang from outside. It was the Thunderbolt bow, which, by the way, was a raggedy bolt-action rifle to you and me. Out there, Staves was rolling about on the ground, gripping the weapon, struggling against something Lady couldn't see through the gap in the door. You can't blame her, as it was a struggle against something very small. Staves rolled onto his feet and fired the weapon again, smacking a handful of dirt up from beside him, but doing nothing to stop the ravenous, mad, manic, ferocious squirrel that was chomping at his legs. With a cry, he dropped the gun and ran into the kitchen. Lady began to shake and leapt up onto the table before the door burst open. The squirrel was on Staves' shoulder, gnawing at his face.
"Staves, what are you doing?"
Lady shrieked. She had lost control of herself and slid down into a heap against the wall.
"It attacked me! It attacked me!"
Staves said, reeling around and waving his arms to try and get the critter climbing over him. But his large frame made it difficult. After a few rotations, he lost his balance and stumbled into the rock face the kitchen was built against, smashing himself across the forehead and crumpling to the ground. The squirrel kept chewing at him, seemingly intent not on fighting the fellow, but eating him. Luckily, Boy rushed in to investigate the racket and saw his two colony mates incapacitated before the victorious, vicious squirrel. "By the bits!" he had time to exclaim, before the squirrel was rushing up at him too. But the forest creature had met his match. Boy was quick with the dagger in his belt, and within a second the kitchen was decorated with the rodent's innards. The sight had Lady hyperventilating, and Boy was at once beside her, pulling her close. "It's alright, nothing more," he said. "Mad beast. Must have been taken by a curse. Are you hurt?"
"No, but I think Staves,"
Lady whispered. Staves wasn't moving. Boy rolled him over and saw he was breathing, but his face was bloody from a gash above his eyes. "Hold still, Wonk. Got just the thing," Boy said, racing out and returning in moments with a blue bag from the colony kit. It was a first aid kit, but Boy was unfamiliar with the majority of the things inside. A bandage he understood though, and after a struggle with the paper wrapping, he had Staves striped with white fabric over all manner of leaking cuts. "Unbelievable. What did you do?" Boy asked.
"It wanted to kill me," Staves said.
"And here I was thinking these familiar animals were another sign of the Hillocat. Maybe they are a little different to our ones."
"It was mad."
"Let's hope it don't have any friends out there then. A single squirrel bringing us to our knees. That's no way to go about things, is it? Bits hide the day the trees send us two of the beasts."
"Boy,"
Staves wheezed. "I'm here, Wonk. You'll be fine. First time getting a drop of the flow spilled."
I asked Lady. She said she didn't say she was not in love with me, but she didn't say she was.
"You what?" Boy said, his smile swinging open as he turned to gawk at Lady on the table.
"Staves, you pitbug!"
Lady raged, opening her reddened eyes and sitting up. "I reckon you're right, my lad," Boy said, clapping Staves on the shoulder and getting a pained groan in response. "You're a braver bit than I thought, though. Asking a girl that to her face, and doing deadly battle with a monster. Proper night this one is. I'll never make it, will I?" Boy's attempts at levity missed Lady entirely, but it was a familiar scene for her. He was always like this after an incident back on the old farm. It wasn't meant to cheer her up, just bring her back from the brink. And she was certainly back today, scowling at the two men sat in the dirt below her fortress table. Boy sighed. "Right lot of bloody chances we are, eh?" he said.
"He is anyway,"
Lady said of Staves. "He's getting used to it, aren't you?"
"I don't know,"
Staves muttered. "Nah, you are. You, brave Sir Wonk, and the strong lady up there, and this here farm boy. Us three are gonna make it. We're going up in the world, and we're gonna find out what the pieces have planned for us here. Simple as that, isn't it?" It was not as simple as that, but Boy had the right spirit. This brings the story to the end of its introduction, wherein those three bloody chances came to call the mountain cove their home. They pledged together to keep themselves alive,
and to one day work out how this new world was connected to their own pieces, the land and Lord. It wouldn't be easy, but it wouldn't be a roll-up chronicle if it was, as they said in the old days. The new days would have them saying it again. It had been about a week since 3 citizens of a very distant kingdom of pieces crash-landed on an unknown world. They knew it had been a week, since the world's days were the same length as on Pieces, as far as they could tell. And that wasn't the only similarity. An ancient language on Pieces, One Bastion, was still in use in the new world, and the flora and fauna bore close resemblance to the crops and animals that Farmer Boy had been bringing to market his whole life. A week of pondering wasn't enough to suss out the connection, but as we've already covered, it did bring about the decision to make something of the mystery. The crew got to work turning their terrace of shaky huts into a proper homestead, tucked into the coves in the side of the shady blue mesa overlooking the scene. Boy was busy churning up mud and breaking open cuboidal seed boxes packed with boring old rice and taters. Lady was hammering together fresh walls to mark out larders, a kitchen, and a spacious living hall. Staves agreed with them that the work would go faster if he helped. He was an educated wonk after all, so he knew about division of labour, but he still couldn't get the darned chrome metal eggs from the colony kit to open, whether it was by sledgehammer, burning quill, or seductive whispering. His mouth, that Boy and Lady had to unwillingly feed, was the key to their survival, according to their scheming Aunt Missy. He spoke this One Bastion tongue, so any run-ins with the supposedly numerous locals would depend entirely on him. Not wanting the orphaned siblings to be short-changed, someone showed up to test this system out after their first evening of serious work. Boy saw them well in advance, hiking with swaying gait from downriver. "Wonk, come on," he said to Staves as he pulled him out of the egg shed. Staves grunted and broke free, running into his hut. "Stop bloody hiding! World's feeding you, isn't it? It's the outside of the castle that really matters, not the—" Oh. Boy stopped as Staves re-emerged, holding the rifle up like a banner pole. "Might kill them," he remarked. "Don't kill 'em, just tell 'em how it is. Actually, no, you just translate what I say, alright?" Boy said, now trotting to keep up with Staves as he rushed to meet the traveller. The traveller was a stone's throw away now. It was a teenage girl, perhaps only a little younger than Lady, barely dressed in animal skins, barefooted, and carrying no luggage but a metal-edged knife. "Bloody bits, who's this feral child?" Boy said, holding Stave still with an arm. Stave started calling out in a soft language packed with L sounds, drawing no reply from the steadily approaching girl. "What did you say?" Boy asked. "Just translated what you said," Staves said. "No, how'd you keep a castle with— Look, tell her to stop." Staves said a few more unknown syllables. The girl stretched her arms out, lowered her stance, and swept her knife through the air, shouting out "Kote" or a noise to that effect. "I think she'll kill us," Staves concluded, coolly kicking the rifle up to face forwards and pulling the firing lever. The shot flew off to places unknown. "Mad wonk, tell her to stop!" Boy shouted. "Telling her," Staves nodded, shaking the bolt action of the rifle around in the ceremony he had previously determined caused the thunder stuff to be rejuvenated. The girl was stamping through the ankle-deep flank of the riverside, rounding some rocks to get a clear path forwards. The next bang cut her leg, and she almost buckled. "What did it do?" Boy asked. Stave said nothing, quickly performing the ceremony again. The girl screamed out, repeated that noise from before, and ran with knife overhead right towards Staves. Staves coldly pointed the rifle at her as her feet started sinking into the soft dirt Boy had been planting in earlier. Staves fired, blasting that mud into the air. "Don't shoot my crops!" Boy cried. "I think she's gonna kill me," Stave said, dropping the rifle with a shiver. "Kote!" the girl shrieked, lunging through shifting rows of soil. "I think she's gonna kill my taters," Boy said, pointing his dagger forward with both hands like a knight's longsword. As the girl kicked her way out of the field and up to Staves, Boy tackled her from the side, rolled over her on the ground, then quickly plunged the dagger into her chest. Her knife, now clearly stained with dry blood, fell to the ground. "Ask her who she is," Boy growled to Staves. "She's dead, Boy. Can't you tell?" Staves said, his composure rushing back as quickly as it had abandoned him. "What?" The dagger was right through the heart. Boy sighed and stood up, wiping himself down. "What from the pits was all that about then?" he said, angry. "She was gonna kill me," Staves nodded. "Why's that then, wonk?" "Dunno. You were supposed to talk to her." "I did." "With your mouth, not your thunder thing." "She didn't answer to either." "Yeah, well now we've killed Bits knows who, and that's not going to be the end of it, is it?" "Dunno." "That's right, you dunno. What was she screaming, then? Sounded like something." "Dunno." "You speak wonky talk, don't you?" "It weren't one bastion, but I don't know all of it." "Aren't you the least bit bothered here?" Boy said, moving closer to Staves, who was indeed extremely calm. "Not anymore," Staves said. "But you're a little dirty, so I'll leave you be." "My bloody crops," Boy said to himself, reminded of the high-order crime the attacker's feet had committed. By the time he was done rearranging his rows of soil mounds, Staves was long gone. "What was that?" Lady asked him inside the skeleton living hall. "Local with a knife tried to kill me," Staves reported. "Sweet Hollows, are you okay?" "Fine. Boy killed her." "Boy? Okay." "He stabbed her." "Staves, don't mention it, alright?" "Thought you wanted to know." "Please, no, I don't like it. Let's just leave it at that." "Shouldn't leave the body out there." "Staves, stop it!" Lady shouted, tears forming in her eyes. As you might have guessed, Lady was not at all wont to hear of violence. Not that she wasn't accustomed to it. In fact, it was the opposite problem. Staves, on the other hand, thought nothing of it at all. This, then, was the latest way in which he was of use to them, for his murder in the fields was no freak incident. As well as the more sophisticated tool bench colonists that Missy had gone off with, there were plenty of other communities making their mark all across the mountain chains and temperate plains for many a horizon distant, and they'd noticed the drop pods stream down from the sky too. The next evening, Boy felt his stomach drop as a band 8 strong came along the mountainside, dressed in animal skins adorned with roughly cut metal plates. Staves was immediately on the perimeter with rifle in hand, but when he held it up to show his weapon, the group all held up their hands too, waving. They made their way to the river to refill containers, then walked off south, following the river down the shallow hill towards a hidden pass in the mountain chain. They were too distant to see by then, but they were travelling by fire torches in the night, and the flickering dots disappeared into the mesas long after midnight. Only then did Staves stand down. Lady was woken by the sound of him traipsing to bed. "Stave, what happened?" she asked groggily from her door. "They didn't kill any of us this time. I think we've made good progress," Staves concluded, heading abed with a rifle and a smile. Well, he was right about the not killing part at least, but there's a lot more to the New World story here, and it'll come knocking soon enough. In the meantime, there was a big problem with this emergency colonization venture. They'd slapped together a nice living space and laid out all the kitchen equipment, known and unknown, but it was all just decoration with nothing to cook. And a lovely living space was a cruel irony with nothing to eat. Yes, the sweet mush from the cosmos had run its course, digestively speaking, and with the rest of the colony kit's supplies jettisoned to lands unknown across the planet, the crew needed to urgently work out what these wild locals were eating. "Gonna be a good month until the first harvest, by the smell of the soil," Boy reported at a colony meeting in the hall. "And we've got enough boxes left to last until this afternoon," Lady said. Staves shook his head, folding another wrapper into the collection in his bulging chest pocket. "Well, we got the dog," Boy said. Cannibal was sat at Staves' side, and upon hearing the word dog, eagerly trotted around the table and stuck her tongue out at Boy. "Don't taste that good though," Boy carried on, averting his gaze. "We have to go out and find something. Foraging. Maybe even, Lady said, trailing off. "Yeah, we gotta find us a wild pig. Wonk, you're pretty handy with a thunderbow, ain't ya?" "I can pull the lever," he nodded. "Think you can catch us anything?" "Oh yeah, sure." "Really? It means working, you know." "You think I'm adverse to working?" Yeah. You've been lying on your arse a good week, ain't ya?" "Been working on stuff." "Like those bloomin' eggs?" "And the thunderbolt lever." "Right. Well, this time you gotta bring home the bacon. Take your mutt. I'll see what's edible in the forest. Lady, you can get the last of the gear up to the storeroom." "Are you in charge?" "What?" "You're giving everyone orders." "Well, feel free to disagree, mighty wonk." "No, I'll do it." "Don't tell Lady what to do, though," Stave said, standing and summoning Cannibal with a snap of his fingers. "I wasn't telling her, just putting ideas out, wasn't I?" Boy protested, looking to Lady. She took her eyes off Stave's, then shrugged unconvincingly. "Bloody bits, it's a fat keg in here. Need a walk and all." So everyone did their bit for the survival of the colony, and returned to the table that evening with their progress reports. Boy placed a large plastic box on the table. Inside, long, oily leaves divided different piles of seeds and berries from the mountainside's sparse woods, all guaranteed to be edible by the infallible Boy smell test. "Really, it's all just the same junk as pieces. Sure as this is a chokeberry, there's a hillocat in these lands," he said, popping a shiny purple berry in his mouth. Cannibal stared up at him, sitting neatly at his feet. "Not safe for dogs, but we got the old classic here, blackberries." Boy threw a handful across the room and Cannibal sped off. "You didn't find anything then, Wonk?" Lady asked. "I saw a few things," he said, not looking up from the table. "That's no good, we'll be growling hungry by morning," Boy said. "I was trusting you to get something, Wonk." "I did get something," Stave said. With theatrical flair he removed his hat, revealing that his hair had been flattened and thoroughly soiled by a pair of tortoises. As you might guess, they were very small, such that one's hat is more than enough to carry them. "What are those?" Lady asked. "Slow shells. Can't eat them, but they're quite funny." "Funny? We're going to die, Staves, that ain't funny!" "What about the other one?" "Other what?" "The other person, the one Boy killed." He was referring to the teenager from earlier, whose body Boy had dragged off his fields and left in a cave further along the mountain. "She's no help to us now, Wonk. Or are you thinking of roasting her up for breakfast?" Boy smirked. "If you don't mind," Staves nodded. "By the bits, you're a shattering pitbug for real, and I don't care if Sis loves you. You got until morning to think up something in your big-ass head, or we're eating your stupid shell lizards for breakfast." "They aren't edible," Staves insisted, reaching to pick them back up, but Boy was quick to put them under his own hat, a spongy helmet from the colony kit that complemented his bowl cut perfectly by hiding it entirely. Fortunately for everyone, especially the poor tortoises, the next morning brought a chance to buy their way out of trouble. A group of scrappily dressed locals came up the mountain with large, white-furred pack animals. Once Boy convinced Staves to first not shoot them, then to come back out of his room, the pair approached the caravan. "Just greet them nicely," Boy muttered. Stave said a word that sounded a bit like the Hillo from Hillocat. The group were smiling, some waving, but didn't say anything. Staves went on to say a few sentences more in one bastion, during which the group seemed to push a pink-haired woman to the front. She spoke to Staves, but keep in mind that the following conversation was unintelligible to any but the two of them. "Thanks for not killing us then. We're selling if you're buying," the woman said. "Food, please," Staves nodded, hands on his stomach. "Didn't you bring any with you, huh? Rumor is you fell down from the sky." "Yeah, we did." "So what is it? Are more colony ships coming?" "It was just us, I think." "Where's your ship? Where's the rest? Legend said there'd be loads of you." "Broke in the cosmos. It's us now." "Oh, my apologies. You must be looking for Era for Tet then, if you speak Arif English." Maybe. Didn't they tell you where to go? I think it's all just a bit of an accident. I don't really know where we are, or who you are. I'm just hungry. The woman sighed at this. I had to pull strings to get on this caravan and you're brain dead. I thought there was going to be help. Are you looking for the Hillocat? What? Hillocat? How long were you in stasis up there? In stasis? No, we were in Tindra, the Holy Kingdom. You don't even know. Man, you're the unluckiest bunch I've ever seen, and I'm me. You don't even know what's going on here, do you? Might do after the food. Yeah. Stop your old-fashioned talking and I'll tell you about the mess you're in. Mess you're making too, huh? What this pink-haired woman explained to Staves, which Staves later relayed to Boy and Lady, and then to Attentive Cannibal, was a rundown of what was going on. Probably handy for you to have some notes here as well, so let's summarize the main points. The world, which she called Reticot, had been colonized by cosmic people twice over the last 2,000 years. She was a descendant from the latter group, whereas her travelling party were all from the former. The distinction was that the first wave had been a disaster in which all semblance of civilization was torn down after a couple of generations. Everything had run out pronto, and everyone was back to basics, creating the three tribes of Reticot, the Boka, the Zospa, and the Tranka. The caravan was from the Boka, but she was actually from a mouthful of a place called Eraphonavelium. This was one of the two latter wave societies that still clung on to cosmic ways, along with Tetius, which had a reputation for civilization like nowhere else. As you might imagine, the second wavers and first wavers weren't on very good terms, and the Zospa and Tranka were in full-on war with the more advanced but less numerous Tets and Eraphs. The Boka constituted a kind of neutral go-between, selling to both sides and all that. This local political strife was the reason behind the wild attack of the feral teen previously, and it came with the warning that once the warring tribes sniffed out the colony, it was going to be on the chopping block. How long was that going to take? Probably not that long, as literally during the conversation, a naked man with a wooden club emerged from the undergrowth and shouted that word, Kote. The Boka tribespeople seemed rather disturbed by this, and hurriedly conferred with each other. Is he going to kill us? Staves asked the pink-haired woman. Yeah, it's a religious thing I haven't quite got to yet. Kare means something like important rolling, or he's not a Baka though. Trouble. It was trouble. The man charged into the colony with his club at the ready. The Boka unshouldered short bows and shot off some arrows. A couple hit the target, but he kept coming. I'll do it, Staves offered calmly, swinging up his rifle. A rifle, the woman remarked. Called a thunderbow, I think, Staves claimed. He fired it twice, now very quick on the reload ceremony, but the bullets clacked into the woods down the hill. I'll do it, the woman insisted, snatching the rifle and throwing it like a javelin. The target was being surrounded by the Boka and didn't notice the weapon swooping down. The butt bonked him squarely in the face and sent him reeling. The rifle reeled the other way for a split second, but the impact had jolted the firing pin, so it thundered and was rocketed back in the attacker's face by the force of the recoil. The nude clubman was knocked out cold. While the Boka caravanners seemed to recognize this, it didn't stop Boy carrying on the long charge he had been making across the colony. His racing and roar gave out by the time he reached the target, but the Boka people murmured approval and grinned at him. The matter was then sidelined so that Staves could actually use the caravan's services. They were laden with food, and the colony kit was awash with little nubs of purified silver, which the Boka were more than willing to take as currency. That's the whole buying their way out of trouble thing I mentioned earlier. But it still left the matter of the not actually dead Tranka tribe warrior lying at the colony entrance. That's your problem, the pink-haired lady informed Staves. If he's not dead, then there's no problem, Staves reasoned. I bet he'll agree when he wakes up. Good luck with that. Are you going now? Yep. We'll be back next year, maybe 60 days from now. You know about the years, right? Same as Tindra. What? Oh, your home place. Whatever. Just try to get yourself in with the Tets. They might help you. Got the hands full though, so... Just keep your head straight, okay? See ya. Wait, can I ask you an important question? Go on then. How come you're in the tribe if you're from the cosmic people? Money, she sighed. You'll see how it is. Goes the other way too sometimes. Oh, right. Were you a slave? Kinda. Don't want to talk about it, alright? I understand. There's a girl who might love me who had something like that. But I'm not allowed to ask about it. Hey, big boy. If she loves you, she'll tell you the truth, won't she? Oh. You mean... I understand. Do you? I dunno. Worry about the crops for now, huh? Or you'll be in chains next time Tranka come. Or dead. As the caravan made their way off, Boy and Lady came up to get the story from Staves. Being a tactful fellow, he left out his suspicions that Lady wasn't in love with him this time, but fully intended to discuss it with Boy later. In the meantime, they had a bruised brute lying in the grass to deal with. This begins a winding tale of eating, meeting and greeting with the full scope of the new world of Reticot coming into view. So let's get to that next. There's a man in the shed, Staves announced. His shadowed frontage blocked the last light from the door of the colony's main hall. I call it a colony. Boy had just been discussing plans to make it more like a fort instead, given the apparent threat of nude clubbers in the bushes, alarming at the best of times. Yes, Wonk, and you need to find out where he's from, how many soldiers they have, what weapons they have, how much they know about us, and what their nasty plan is, Boy instructed. Ask his name as well? Lady added. No thanks, Stave said, with not so much as a salute, heading off to bed. Remember what you promised to Auntie, Boy called after him. This caused Staves to hurry his pace. The next morning though, he did peek into his work shed and saw the attacker flat on his back in the dirt, bandages and gauze wrapped around wounds. His shiny hair was tied in a ponytail that stuck out from under his sharp-boned head. He was also completely naked, but Staves was used to that from his old life in the castle. It was quite the life. Are you dead? Staves said through a gap in the doorway. The man inside groaned and began to roll, but recoiled back when a wound touched the ground. Just say yes, Staves added, but it didn't happen. Staves found Boy and Lady pondering the rice field beside the hall. Didn't say he was alive, he reported. He's alive, Wonk, saw to it myself, Boy said. Why didn't you kill them this time? Oi, watch it! He's our only warning for what might happen. So he's our prisoner until we work out what we can do with him, alright? We're gonna eat him after. Bits of old hollow. Right, we need some ground rules here, don't we? Number 1 rule of 3-Up Fortress. Don't eat the pets, even the human ones. My hands off the slow shells, yours off the man mutton. Okay, Wonk? What if he starts eating us? Staves asked, smiling with the confidence of a sagely philosopher. Won't come to that, right, Lady? Nope, we're good to go here, Lady said. She had some grains of rice in her hands, pulled from the plants at her feet. She wafted them in front of Boy, who took a long sniff. Yeah, it's harvesting time, bitty bug, Boy announced in triumph. Sounded like work, so that got rid of Staves. You might be wondering how it was harvesting time if the whole venture was no more than 2 weeks old. Well, little did the likes of Boy know, the plants he'd been cultivating his whole life were heavily tinkered with by his ancient ancestors. Genetic engineering to you and me, and magic to them. This tinkering let common crops shoot up in a mere 30 days. But that's the sort of number an amateur farmer would pull. Boy, with his expert mounds, crafted mulch, and meticulous monoculture, was pushing that poor soil to its limits. As such, delicious meals of rice avec rice a la mode de boiled river water were about to be available in an all-you-can-eat fashion. More than enough to keep a pet tribal warrior alive in the shed, and hope that he spills the beans on how to deal with the threat of unwelcome visitors. The surplus also gave Staves a chance to show off his hidden talents. Having spent his childhood living with the animal folk of his lord's castle, and very much only with them, he had a certain way with critters that precisely mirrored his certain lack of a way with humans. With boxes of rice in hand, he could be found wandering the woods over the next few days, tempting the local wildlife to join him for lunch. One night he returned to the would-be fort with a large, woolly companion, the same lumbering mammal the Bokker had been using to haul their wares. It was almost entirely curtained by long white hair, just slightly thinner over a head section on the front, where narrow eyes and a long tongue dealt with the outside world. "What by the bits is that?" Boy demanded of Staves as he led his new friend home. "They're grazing in a field below the drop-off there. The dirt on the fur isn't from here. Nomadic," Staves said. The big creature let out a sharp breath, blasting its frontal fur about for a moment. "Right, what's it called?" Boy asked, venturing closer with his left hand creeping towards his dagger. It's not that he didn't trust Staves, it's that no one in their right mind would trust Staves. "It hasn't told me yet," was the answer. "Can't argue with that." "Looks like we can shear it," Boy nodded after inspecting the thick coat. "Not quite a sheep, but this ain't quite pieces, is it? Let's have it then. Wait, hang on. Is that thing gonna eat my crops?" Staves leant into the creature's fur, sticking his head in a little. It sounded a bit like he was whispering in there. Then he returned. "It doesn't want to say," Staves claimed. Boy decided to keep the mega sheep away from the fields whenever he could, with Lady's help. I should note here, for the sake of fairness, that while all this gripping farming action is being credited to Boy, Lady too was quite the soil sleuth, just 10 years short of Boy's experience. She didn't call herself a professional farmer, even though she was, probably because her route into that profession had been in the chains of an army from the Tindra Holy Kingdom. Point is, it was both of them summoning up rice and taters from the mud, and Staves summoning tiny turtles and supersized sheep. Altogether, it was turning into a proper farm. Yet the more the three had, the more that could be taken from them, and indeed the more enterprising locals would be tempted to make their move. It was before dawn when Cannibal was heard barking wildly from the shed, a bedroom she was now sharing with the turtles, mega sheep, and tied up half-conscious unknown naked guy. Staves knew the bark well, and was out in the fields with the rifle before anyone else got a foot out of bed. At the sound of the first thunderbolt, Boy doubled his pace. A couple more cracks sounded, then he ran into Staves rounding the outermost shed with the rifle over his shoulder. "Could float them down the river," he suggested. "What was it?" Boy asked. "Dead." "Dead person?" "Not a person if they're dead." Yeah. Look at you killing people without a tinge at the crack of dawn." "It's just like a crossbow. You can look down the top here to make it hit wherever you want. If you want anything shot, just ask. I'll be getting back now." "Thanks for the offer, Wonk. You be careful there," Boy said with a wavering tone. It had just hit him that he lived with a cold-blooded killer who'd rather shoot you than look you in the eye. Then again, that wasn't entirely unwelcome, given that the locals apparently had such folk in good supply. Boy's day started with pushing another dead girl out into the river to float out of sight. Then it was breakfast time. Rice again. The day after that, Boy and Lady got together the last of the wooden boards and started blocking off most of the entrances to their mountain cove. By walling everything in, the fort would earn its namesake. A gap was left to act as a gateway, albeit one with no gate. Boy was no military engineer, but he'd seen similar arrangements in border camps over the years. The idea was to give attackers a path of least resistance, so you could reliably guess where they'd appear. Then all they needed was Staves to align his iron sights with the gateway, and there was no way in. So in many ways, while the minstrel contributed nothing to the construction of the fort,
It was all useless without him. Somehow the wonk had wonked them all right into his palm. While that project came along, the pet human in the shed started making noises. Their captive had recovered from his unconscious daze and was shouting things in an unknown tongue. Boy entered with a plastic bowl piled high with steaming rice. He placed it in front of the glaring captive and then watched the man try to eat it. His hands were bound, and when he looked to Boy and gestured at them, Boy did nothing. Catching on, the man did his best to wolf down the wet, overcooked clump. "We'll let you go if you help us," Boy said, speaking his native Tindril. Obviously that didn't really get a reaction. "Hillocat," he said, pointing around in various directions and repeating it. The man shrugged at this and said something in a gruff voice that contained the word Hillocat at least twice. "Wonk!" Boy called around the door. Cannibal was first to arrive, but the house-trained translator showed up too, carrying tortoises in his upturned hat. "Going for a walk," he said. "Wonk, he understands the priest talk. Time to find out what he knows, right?" Boy said. "Okay," Staves mumbled, heading into the shed, then pushing Boy out and closing the door. "You sure about that, Wonk?" Boy said to the door. But already the talk from inside had started up. Boy put his ear to the frame, but it was all just undecipherable syllables. A few hours passed with the mumbling in the shed carrying on. When Staves finally emerged, with Cannibal bursting out ahead of him, Boy and Lady were done hammering the wall into place and were sitting in the shady grass below it, enjoying the warm evenings of Reticot's summer. Cannibal danced around them for a bit, then raced off. "Hey, what were you doing in there?" Lady called to Staves, stopping him from wandering right past them. "He's a wise man," Staves said. He threw something from his pocket over the wall, and Cannibal ventured out after it. "What does he know?" Boy demanded. "He keeps legends in the Union. It's called Chanka, which means clean water. He told me they're poems." "You understood him? Is he part of the One Bastion thing?" Lady asked. "He knows the whole thing, and now so do I," Staves said. There was a pause. "Well, what is it?" Boy said, tearing the grass up beside him. Staves held up a hand and looked at the gap in the walls. Boy made a few more insistences, but Staves kept replying only with a staying gesture. Then Cannibal came bounding back with something in her mouth. Staves retrieved it and held it up. It was one of those metal eggs, drooly and with bits of grass stuck to the sides. "You can talk any of the old languages with these, if you follow the ceremony," he said. "One Bastion's one of them, and there's something called Sparish which the Union has. You get both. But he didn't understand Tindril, so that's not an old language then." "Are you talking about magic? That's how he understood you?" Lady asked, standing and approaching the upheld egg with wide eyes. "I think so. I'm going to do the ceremony now." Staves then ran off. While the other two questioned the whole affair, he rummaged in his shed and returned with an armful of the shiny metal eggs. He gave Boy and Lady one each and told them to hang on to it. Then he rushed off again and came back with a single bowl of rice. With absolute confidence, he explained the nature of this ceremony he had learned from the prisoner. First, the three of them had to stand together in a tight circle, each holding a metal egg in their mouth. Then they had to hold hands, look up at the sky, and circle around with knees bent, screaming. The final step was to pass around the rice and snort a couple of grains. Now you're probably starting to suspect that the prisoner might have been taking Staves for a fool and lying to him just to get revenge on his captors with an outlandish trick. Two of the three participants suspected this as well, loudly and repeatedly. But Staves' absolute confidence was so alluring that it seemed impossible that the ludicrous dance they found themselves doing was anything but the best route to survival. And it's not like it didn't do anything. As they circled and screamed with egg-plugged mouths, the egg started to shrink. It fizzled and foamed up, and when Lady started to cough, Staves slammed his hand over her mouth to stop any escaping. Lady wished to protest, but was both overwhelmed by the feeling that she was drowning and that she was asleep, barely able to move her heavy limbs. After about a minute, the fizzling subsided and all felt normal again. Before Boy had time to curse and cuss his thoughts on the matter, Staves was showing them the best way to snort up rice. Then he placed a grain in each ear, bending over and tapping his head to make sure it got right on in there. And that's how he learned to speak Sparish. While the other two cringed their way to a similar point, I should let you know what these egg screamers didn't, that being what on Reticot was going on. The eggs, you see, were cunning devices that the cosmic people used to mix colonists from different places together. Activated by the close action of the vocal cords, the eggs deployed an advanced mechanobacterial layer that adorned the voice box, nasal cavities, and outer ear canals of the recipient/victim. The sagacious secretion would then diligently monitor your speech to learn whatever wild Rimworld languages colonists might encounter, and then translate them into a more reasonable one, such as Erefinglish or Sparish, cosmic people tongues. According to the prisoner, such a treatment had been forced upon the first wave of Reticot colonists by the second, who effectively brought those tongues to the planet and overwrote whatever corruption the fallen civilization had ended up with over the dark centuries. To be accurate, the explanation the prisoner gave was about an hour longer than this, and involved a lengthy mythical tale of love, war, forbidden dairy products, and a long interlude on how the planet was originally created inside a giant wheel of some kind. Maybe it was. But Smarty Staves managed to make some connection between the tale and the eggs, and then drove us all to the current point in the story, in which his choking colony mates were now having the tindril vibrated out of them. The more they complained, the more tindril the egg fluids got to listen to, and the faster the process went. If you want the short version of all this, in the future, don't ask why the colonists are able to understand what the locals are saying. It's just something to do with eggs, and now let's move swiftly on. I'm not even going to explain why the rice snorting was required, or if it was required. Life in the colony carried on, with the professional farmers farming professionally, the prisoner sleeping in the shed with Cannibal, a mega sheep and a couple of tortoises, and Staves, now freed of the egg mystery, busily rifling through all the other machinations that had come down from space with them. This rapidly brought about a certain revolution. Staves noticed that a little pinwheel in the kit was connected by a tube to a greenish board with a load of lumps glued to it. When he blew on the pinwheel, a green light would appear on the board for a moment, then fade as the wheel halted. He had discovered electricity, or as he called it, blow work. A better name for it really, isn't it? The obvious development was to stick the pinwheel outside and see how the wind made the little green light stay on for much longer. If you had two pinwheels piped in, the light would glow brightly and little spiral things on the board would start spinning also. This was the sort of magic that Staves had heard about in the old songs, the ones banned by the bishops back home. As such, he felt overwhelming guilt when he discovered that piping a few pinwheels to a certain glass ball made it glow as if aflame, even though nothing was being consumed but the great outdoor worldwide blowwork. Boy wasn't happy either. But Lady, on the other hand, kept coming over to the Staves shed to see the latest developments, and surely only for that reason. "And what's this one do?" she asked him, pulling a heavy white tin from the junk pile. Staves took the pipe hanging from the end and pushed it into the blowwork receiver. Another pipe already ran out from it to a little stand with a pedal-like handle on the top. He started turning the handle round and round, and after a few moments the white tin let out a shrill tone that quickly ended. Yellowish writing seemed to appear inside a brown box bolted onto one of its corners. The smaller boxes below had no such writing, but pushing at them made the shrill tone repeat, each time changing the writing in the bigger box to something else. Staves was well out of breath before any further investigations could be made. "One of these things might take us home," Lady said.
You want to go home? Staves asked from the floor. Lady looked at him, then back to the junk. Haven't decided yet. I haven't decided either, Staves said. Boy wants to stay, for the Hillicat. I want to see it too. I just don't know about it. What if this is it? What is it? Shed with the stuff? This is a bit for sure. It's cosmic people stuff, it couldn't be. That's what they say. I dunno though. You're quite the heretic, aren't you? Lady said with a smile. Staves immediately went red. Redder than before anyway, and now not just from hyperventilating. I couldn't help but read things, he said, almost pleading. You think I care about that? Don't tell anyone. I've gone too far. I knew I'd go too far. Staves, seriously? I got you covered, Lady said patronizingly, but Staves did seem relieved to hear it. Lady returned to the pile and dragged out the next exhibit. It was a long metal rod that had buttons, knobs and levers all along one side, and greenish strips of warm glass on the other. At the end was the familiar blowwork intake, or blowhole. You might wonder why they were still calling it blowwork if they were now doing the work by turning a handle. Well, it was just that good of a name. This time, Lady was doing the blowwork, with her hands of course, while Staves remained prostrated on the dry dirt below. Then, the strangest thing happened. As the knobbly rod began to power up, it let out a series of noises, each different to the last. Every few seconds a new noise would emerge, followed by an equal period of silence. What kind of bit is this? Lady asked, huffing away at the handle. Staves dragged himself over to take a closer look, but couldn't make any sense of the little patterns dancing across the glass strips. Then, the next noise to come out said, Hello! Please reply yes if you speak one bastion. Staves fell over backwards and scrambled away from it. I understood. That was one bastion, wasn't it? The thing is done, Lady said, forgetting to turn the handle and hence deactivating the speaking rod. It talked to us, Staves whispered. Was it? Wait, no way. The Overlord, Lady whispered also, falling to her knees. While she wasn't quite right, they had made a startling discovery. And with a little elbow grease at the handle, they could discover more. Time to hear just what this cosmic rod and /or mouthpiece for an almighty deity has to say for itself.